So I ordered this little knife-making Kydex thing, and I just applied that to pistols. When I put it on, I was like, and the light bulb went off, like, this is fucking awesome.
Spent 8 years in the United States Marine Corps Infantry, fought in Iraq and Afghanistan.
That is unpleasant.
It's a veteran-owned and veteran-operated business made here in the USA, where the guy who's obsessive about how good it is. Isn't this where they tested the nukes? They're Marines, they'll be fine.
OnlyFans. That's GFI After Dark. You pay extra for that. 2 guns, 1 holster. The Gunfighters Inc. podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 2 Guns, 1 Holster, the Gunfighters Inc. podcast. I am your host, Mac Winsenberg. I am the marketing manager here at GFI. If you're wondering where Jay's silky sweet voice is, Jay has just decided that the podcast is something he's no longer interested in doing. Nothing wrong with it, nothing against it. He just felt like it wasn't something he wanted to keep going with, so I'll be taking over with Brian. Brian also was busy today, however, so he will not be featuring. So to my right for his podcast debut, we have Mr. Ryan Vigent. Ryan, what do you do here?
Happy to be here. My name is Ryan Vigent. I do the editing and content creation here. Normally behind the scenes, but today we'd step in for our very unreliable podcast guy. So here I am.
Ryan's in front of the cameras this time, so if you haven't seen his face before, that's why. But Ryan is here for a reason as well, and that's because of our special guest across the table. We have Mr. Weston Rogers of G9. Welcome aboard, Weston. And that is Presley making his presence known on the podcast as well.
Happy to be here, guys. Weston Rogers. I'm the business development director at G9. We just shot that great video together, and happy to be here today. Talk about G9, talk about anything else.
Yeah, so what Weston is referencing, when this podcast released, you guys will be able to watch the video at the same time. We got an in-depth, behind-the-scenes look at G9's production factory here in North Idaho. G9 is a self-defense ammunition manufacturer who is now branching into more in the hunting space as well. They make a super cool and unique bullet design that the first time I saw it, I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. The G9 external hollow point, and seeing how cool it was, we actually offer it here in our pro shop. Being another North Idaho brand, reached out to Weston. I was like, hey, how can we see what you guys are all about and maybe learn a little bit more behind the scenes? I come from an ammunition or manufacturer behind this, so I was really interested to see your guys' processes. And I came away very impressed. So for those who don't know G9 at all, Weston, you don't have to, give us the entire history. You guys are obviously relatively new, but, explain, obviously, I think the EHP was the first thing. Explain what that is to those who are just listening and what the ethos and everything is behind it.
Yeah, so G9 was founded by Joshua Mankey, the president and founder man behind all of the crazy designs that we have. But he was tasked with running a security team during a time of crisis. And basically they'd had active shooters in the area. He was put in charge of it and starts kind of taking stock of, what the guys on the team are carrying, things like that. You see Uncle Mike's holsters, random revolvers, and a broad creative smattering of ammunition. And so, Joshua was like, looking at this, okay, well, what do all of these guys need to carry? And so that kind of sent him down a rabbit hole of what's actually good, right? And so you start looking at after action police reports, things like that. And, Winchester White Box was doing a heck of a lot better than barriers. That's what the bad guys are carrying, right? Things like HST, Gold Dot, that kind of thing, doing terrible in barriers. They're getting stuck in car doors. They're deflecting, when they hit windshields. But they are doing their job once they hit. They're not over-penetrating, things like that. They're creating a decent wound. And so that kind of led them to, okay, where do we go from here? We've got kind of 2 different ends of the spectrum, but we need to bring them together to actually create a cohesive, effective defense round. And that sent Joshua just kind of down this rabbit hole. We call it, unraveling a ballistic thread, like a sweater that just keeps coming apart, And he came up with about over 50 patented shapes in projectile design alone, and patented those in, I want to say 2014.
Which is crazy when you guys talk about that, because the amount of actual, and we addressed this in the video some, is really, projectiles haven't changed a ton. I mean, they have in the, we started with a lead ball, but when you got to cartridges, it started with, it's the cup and core bullet has been that way for a long time. And then hollow points obviously have been the standard in self-defense or law enforcement for even longer. I mean, I can't put a date on it. I'd have to look that up, but it's remained relatively unchanged, and there's not a lot of even patented stuff out there. Like, everybody's got a hollow point, everybody's got an FMJ.
It's
like
a different flavor of the same thing, and we've seen that kind of cup and core with a hollow point since around the Civil War. So it's that old of technology, and yeah, you can press them slightly differently, impart slightly different shapes in them, but yeah, you're not changing, you're not really answering any of the shortcomings or making them that much more effective. And so on the pistol side, what we arrived at, Joshua arrived at, was this design here that we see. This is a already fired EHP, noticing that it's still in its original shape.
Yeah, and if you're
cool.
just listening and you're not watching on our YouTube, walk us through this, Weston.
So the external hollow point is a solid copper round that weighs about 80 grains and 9 millimeter, and it has 3 flutes on the front. These 3 flutes feature kind of a parabolic curve at the base of them and are slightly angled. This is what's going to encourage fluid displacement. It's going to be much more efficient than other shapes that have, just a cut in them or a less deep flute.
Yeah, it comes to kind of a triangular, a tri-tip point that is not pointy. It's flat on the top, but it's got these 3 almost like bowl shape. Like you're drilling them out with a CNC machine, I imagine, but it's almost like 3 separate bowls on 3 sides of the bullet that make a sort of a triangular tip to it, and it's solid copper. So
solid copper being hard means it's going to go through barriers with being relatively unchanged, but it's already in the shape it needs to be to create that wounding. So think of a spoon if you're running water from a sink.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, and so if that water's entering the spoon at a relatively vertical angle, right, it's going to have serious cast off. It's actually going to speed up that fluid and create, a pressure differential that's going to create wounding.
And now there's water on my floor when I'm doing the dishes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Or that time it just gets under there and it shoots out the side. Yeah. Same concept.
I remember seeing these for the first time in the pro shop, and I'm not a gun guy at all. I grew up in Massachusetts, and this is all very new to me. But I saw it for the first time. I was like, man, it's like so cool. This looks like nothing I've ever seen, even in the movie. You've seen, Wanted? That movie where they're like trying to curve bullets and stuff.
That is not a movie to talk about ballistics.
I know, but it still looks like, it's
it looks
an
ridiculous.
FMJ,
You look at the EHP, and it looks.
And I remember like thinking like, oh, this is gonna be cool because Mac was the guy who set up the opportunity for us to go do the video. And when I heard you say that was the design was the result of church security, I remember like trying to hold in laughter at first, like because this isn't my world out here. The church that I went to, it just didn't, like, guns around Massachusetts are just so taboo, it's absurd. And I remember thinking like, oh my God. And then I got the folder sent from you guys, all your patents, and you had like 50 patents. I'm like, oh my God, like, I'll like put these all in the video. And it really is just fascinating how nobody has done this. This has been around for, like you said, since like Civil War era, and it has improved, but not drastically like this.
And you guys got to spend some time with Joshua, and is a very unique mind and thinks about things in a way that is actually how they work. And I think that kind of has allowed him to see things differently and approach bullets in a way that it's not just based on the machine that currently stamps them out.
Some people look at something that somebody else does and they're like, okay, here's the improvements I can make upon that. Other people look at something that exists and from the ground up they're like, this is built on flawed hardware.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
This needs to be a complete redesign. So it's a wholly unique bullet, projectile itself, and we I'm not going to jump into that too soon, but we had the opportunity to do the tour like we talked about, and I'd love to hear more about your guys' processes, like I said. But we actually got to see these in action, and all I can say about the G9 is it's as advertised. And to the point where when I was looking at these, and I've seen them in the pro shop, and then I was even talking to you face-to-face, Weston, about, like, you're talking about what they do. Something that almost didn't click with me until seeing it in action is that you weren't talking about a more devastating wound channel, which is what most people are going for. You weren't talking about, like, penetrating power necessarily. What you said, and it almost didn't click until I saw it in person, was your round is so consistent. so consistent. No matter what you do to it, no matter what you shoot through it, it's going to do the same thing within an inch or 2 inches of penetration, which is nuts to think about, but it's still stopping.
Yeah, and that's something that applies to the way traditional bullets, whether it's a hunting bullet, a 9mm hollow point, they have to change status, and these we want to stay the same.
And that's the key thing, the change status.
Hunting ammo. Yeah, our hunting ammo does change status a little bit, but we want them to be unaffected by barriers. Barriers are inherent to every tactical environment, inherent to a lot of hunting environments. If you include, bone or hide as a heavy barrier.
Yeah.
And the reason that it's able to be consistent through barriers is because it's a hard material. Like unlike it's not a changing shape like a cup and core bullet, but you actually the problem that you have, since it is solid copper, is getting it to stop where you want it, and that's what the shape comes in. So, like when we were nerding out about it. Of course, I even knew less when we were doing that, and I'm just sort of like monitoring the cameras. I just thought that the flutes were to create the most devastating impact on your target. But they, but I suppose they are, but I thought that the problem was getting through the barrier, and for you, is the problem that you have is stopping at your target.
Yep, and that's why they're shaped the way they are, and that's I think we've got some wisdom
because
on the
everybody's figured out how to make a bullet penetrate. It's called the FMJ.
Yes,
not not hard.
And a lot of critics out there say, well, okay, if it's going 1,500 feet per second, an FMJ going that fast is going to make a wound as well, and we've tested this side by side just to, we always want to gut check ourselves and make sure that we're not, operating outside of, we're not in our own bubble. And you can take that same profile as shaped like an FMJ functionally at 80 grains, loaded to the same speed, and that thing isn't going to create great wounding, and it's going to overpenetrate like crazy.
Yeah, it's going to zip right through. It's just boom, done.
Yeah.
Which is obviously the collateral damage aspect.
Yeah, and it's just not an effective wound, and we want to create good wounds, and we want them to stop. Those flutes, in a certain way, they kind of look like a boat propeller. And think about throwing a boat in reverse as you're moving forward. It's going to be causing displacement, but it's also going to be, impeding or, reducing momentum going forward. And so that bullet, the flutes are shaped the way they are, for that reason. It's we can kind of control penetration depth based on, either weight behind the projectile or the shape of the flutes. And that's why I think we got a perfect example of it with this round that people who are just listening can't see, but we shot it through a true American steel
old
truck
steel
door.
car door.
and it diminished the flutes quite a bit. And we still had the same terminal effect functionally, right? The wounding was minimized, but it did penetrate.
I think it was an inch of difference from the control.
Yeah.
Maybe an inch and a half, which is nuts. I repeat that because I want to make that clear because, like I said, I talked to Weston. I toured his factory and face-to-face was like, this is cool. It creates a bigger wound channel. This is neat. It goes through hard things and stops. Seeing it happen live. We shot a ballistics gel block with a normal EHP, and it penetrated 18 inches, which is not 18 inches of flesh penetration. Ballistic gel is not a 1-to-1 medium for anybody listening out there. But that is a good test. That's what you want to see. It created a wound channel, and it went 18 inches into the gel. We shot this thing through a car door, and I think it went 16 and a half, 17.
No, it penetrated more deeply, actually.
Oh, it did?
Yeah. So because when it goes through that car door, this projectile kind of looks like it's just been, all of the features have been muted a little bit. It's like we removed part of the boat propeller all the way around.
Yeah, that's true.
And so we have less, outward
There's
force.
less displacement because it's not as sharp as a curve. It's almost FMJE at that point, but still doing what it's meant to do when going through a car door.
Yep, and it's just in a diminished format because of the diminished features.
Which is nuts.
I wish we had time to compare it to an FMJ. An FMJ would go through like 2 of those blocks, right?
I'd say with the 9mm, you're looking at probably about 30 inches of penetration through gel, and that's there are positives to every different type of round out there, and an FMJ is very consistent through all kinds of barriers.
Yeah.
Much better than a hollow point, much better obviously than a frangible, something like that.
Right.
And so that FMJ is going to perform similarly through that car door unless the jacket separates. But it's going to just not create a wound, and it's going to penetrate deeply.
Right.
So we're getting slightly ahead of
Yeah.
ourselves here. We're going to step back. We're going to step back and roll it back.
All right.
Weston, like I said, I was super intrigued to see it, and I think some people would be. Obviously, the video will be the best way to describe it, but I would love to know, like, give us a snapshot of, like, you guys are a small ammo manufacturer here in North Idaho doing big things. What are some of the things you guys do to ensure that the G9 ammo is, in your guys, the best ammunition out there? Like, what are you doing? What are your checks and balances? And what does that kind of look like? Obviously, that's a lot of information, but, give us a snapshot.
Yeah, so this kind of ties in a little bit with the history of G9. G9 started out as an IP company, developing good patents that, could be either replicated by other manufacturers if we're licensed or something like that. And the company grew that way. And then it was a very, very small production ammo company, just a few people loading on hand machines at some point. Wow. And then about the time I was hired, I think I was the fourth or fifth person, probably fifth person hired.
And how old are you guys, just to?
So the company started in 2014 or 13, and then I was hired on in 2021. Okay. So there was a time when, and I say that I was the fourth or fifth person hired. Really, there was some people that moved through that just weren't long-term employees, during the days of hand cranking ammo. And but about that time, we started purchasing, higher quality, more mass production, ammo manufacturing equipment. And so being such a new company or a new factory, we had the opportunity to buy the best of everything, cool. In terms of, the newest model of
you're not running 50-year-old presses.
Exactly. And, a lot of high quality ammunition companies are running really old presses, but it's a different system. They're not as flexible. They can't run, we can switch over between calibers on those machines that load at 100 rounds a minute, but we can switch over between calibers in 4 hours.
Yeah.
But so we had the benefit of kind of getting the newest best tech in terms of our inspection machine, that GI 360.
And that's that enormous one with the laser beam. So yeah, that thing's crazy. Like, to be able to get a 3D scan in the air in a quarter of a second.
Absolutely.
And make sure your ammo is safe.
Yeah, and so the alternative to that is hand inspection, things like that, where you're relying on somebody's eyes and their attention span, but you can case gauge. You can't case gauge every round. I mean, functionally, you're not going to make money doing.
I worked at a big ammunition manufacturer behind this, and they're known for making very consistent, like some of the best as far as consistency ammo goes in the thing. And I think actually you had seen a video of them hand inspecting. You even said you 3D printed a tool that
looked similar to it. Yeah,
that looked very similar.
We used to load trays. Yeah, for a little while. But yeah, so we had the benefit of kind of going to the best tech and starting there as a foundation. And so our loading machines, they load at 100 or over 100, right around there, depending, a minute, and they're inspecting the whole way through. So in theory, everything that makes it off that machine is going to be a safe piece of ammo that's going to fit in a gun. But we take it several steps further than that. We're inspecting, or we're test firing every 5,000 rounds, or every hour, depending on the product we're running. We're getting, pressure data on those rounds. We're getting speeds, obviously, but we're testing throughout that process all the time. Whereas other manufacturers are doing significantly, 10x the size intervals when they're testing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so there's no way to test the round that ends up in your box of ammo, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
fired.
Shoot it. Yeah. And so we do our best to just stay on top of everything, and we learn things about how things change during the day, things like that, and so we can keep a finger on everything as it's being produced. Yeah. But bringing things on like the Hernan waterproofer, that's another step that a lot of manufacturers aren't taking. We're waterproofing all of our ammunition,
which is huge because it's self-defense, and you guys are doing hunting. And if there's the two things I think that I don't want water seeping into anything, into my primer pocket, into my powder, anything like that. Sweat against the body, which you have a sweat guard for that, but still, any steps you can take for self-defense. And then hunting, I beat the living hell out of my hunting rifle and ammunition and stuff like that. You just can't help it.
You plan to bring it in a nice ammo case or whatever, and
and then you get rained on for 8 hours for 3 days in a row.
Yeah, it sits on top of your bag, whatever. And so we make ammunition for some of the most important days in people's lives, whether it's a hunting trip or a self-defense situation. And so we take it incredibly seriously in the way that we waterproof things like that, but we test throughout every lot of projectiles, cases, all of that. It's being tested as it's received. We we DQ a lot of stuff, even though it's made on a Swiss turn machine, and really one of the most precise ways of manufacturing anything. We'll get bad lots in sometimes, and we'll reject bullets and lose money on it. But it's
dive into that a little bit, Weston, because I'm familiar with Swiss turn bullets, but for the longest time we've shot cup and core, especially in the hunting world, especially there. Like, talk about the benefits, just to segue a little bit, of that Swiss turn bullet, because I've actually worked with other manufacturers on that, and so I know what you get out of that. But for anybody listening, like,
so I guess first and foremost, you can build features into a bullet that you can't build in when you're pressing them on a press. That being, our patented side geometry, those driving bands that relieve pressure in the barrel. But that's a great visual for it, because those things are some big old driving bands on that one.
Yeah, that's a 375. It's got some big ones.
And so it relieves pressure in the barrel, so you can run higher velocities at lower pressures, but also they're machined in a way that they're not going to break the slip screen, and so you're not going to diminish BC like other driving bands do. Beyond that, we're getting exact densities throughout the bullet, and so whether it's a match bullet, whether it's a hunting bullet, even well-made, cup and core bullets, they're going to have imprecise densities because they are, being pressed into another shape.
Yeah, you might have a lighter density of the lead alloy in there. The jacket might be a little thicker or thinner on another side. Some people, like, this is brand new news to them, but it can just be, there's very good cup and core ammunition out there, but it is prone to inconsistencies because of the way that it's made.
And look at the use case, and some of the most, I guess, people who are the most down to detail or anal about their ammunition, bench rush shooters, they're sorting all of their bullets, and they're buying them from the best manufacturers too. And so, if the best of a certain method still is producing inconsistencies, then there's got to be a better way to do it.
Yeah. Well, it's because you cannot test these things that are going to be in the box that you fire.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a huge hurdle for a manufacturer to be able to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing you can do is just reduce inconsistencies and create redundancies.
Exactly.
So you're testing when you put the bullet together, right? When you're pressing it, you have laser precise measurements there, and then right after that you have this massive machine that runs lasers and does the 360 readout. So that's immediately after it's built, it's getting tested individually, while also being tested per 5,000 rounds. And then after that goes to a waterproofer that tests it again.
Yep.
And
I mean, you send it out to Adam in the dungeon, and he shoots it.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, you set it up with the components that it's made of. You said it's made with, the absolute best brass that you could obtain on the planet, which is alpha brass.
Yeah,
and
some stuff. Yeah.
Then you CNC all your bullets, so that way there's even, you're talking to 1,000th of tolerance that these things are going to.
Less than that, yeah.
Yeah,
we're talking,
so, you have to go so overkill with building these things, so that way you don't have inconsistencies. And it's just kind of wild to see. You don't see a car manufacturer do anything like that, because they can just turn the car on and see if it works. Or
exactly. And Gunfighters is a great example. You guys make fantastic holsters, and you guys you verify fit with a real gun on every single one you make, because there are sometimes problems in manufacturing process where something, and you guys can fix it before it goes out. And we can't do that, though, and so we have to create these incredibly strict policies. And our company is a great place filled with great people who most people came from outside of the industry, and we're bringing their own spin. And one of the great things we have is a Kyle, who Kyle loves writing policy, procedure, and bringing them to life. And that's I think that's
takes a special kind of person.
I know, and it's not me, and it's not a lot of people in our company, but he loves it. And so all of those things that make ammo start from the ground up, though. It takes those policies, procedures that aren't sexy, aren't fun,
right?
Unless you're Kyle. And
shout out to Kyle.
Yep. And that's how we produce the same thing every single day, because we can't check for fit before it goes out. We can measure it, but we can't check for function.
You are it's like a crappy way of saying it, but for the best case scenario, you are looking to create the best set of averages.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like you want to average across the board. You want the mean to be so consistent that if there's an outlier, it's truly that. It is an outlier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we want our entire product as a whole to be like the EHP. You know what I mean? It's going to perform the same way every single time, regardless of a variety of
What's your
circumstances.
guys' slogan again on that?
Defend, protect, provide.
Yeah, it should have just been like consistency is key.
Yeah. Yeah. Foolish
No, it's a good
consistency
one.
is the hobgoblin of little minds. Is that like a
What?
Emerson quote? I always yeah, every time
Polish
I
consistency?
foolish consistency is that's an Emerson quote. You can take that one out.
That one, I'll have to look that one up. Look it up if you're watching.
Yeah, no, but we do take it down to the nth level, and we really only talked about the EHP so far, but I think it's just a good example of it's one of our premier products, and
Yeah, and open it up to whatever. We got a lot of bullets on the table here, so
Yeah,
whatever
absolutely.
you want to tout, Weston.
Our Woodsman round, which I think you guys probably sell more Woodsman than EHPs, just because of a lot of the use cases on your guys'
Kenai
holsters.
kind of lines up with the Woodsman
Yes.
pretty well.
Very well. Yeah, and so it's a unique shape. It doesn't feature those kind of scoops or separate parabolic shapes, and that's because the EHP is all about penetration, but improved penetration. So if you load something up really hot and heavy, like a heavy hard cast, which those things are loaded way beyond SAMI pressure, which is a different problem. But you're taking a unimproved shape, a flat nose bullet, and you're just hammering it really hard at something. It's got good momentum. And
Walk softly and carry a big stick.
exactly, yeah. But there's a smarter way to do
talk
it.
softly.
You can you can carry a really nice gun instead of a big stick. And that shape is all about creating some good fluid cast off, but not so much that it's impeding its forward momentum, and it's actually kind of making space for itself to penetrate more deeply. We've taken those and squared them off, and run up to the same speeds, and again, they don't penetrate as deeply if they don't have that improved shape, or they don't perform as well if they don't have that improved shape.
Yeah, so the Woodsman, when you're looking at it, available in your guys' 9 and 10 millimeter loadings.
And 40 and 45 too.
45
Yeah.
and 40. And so if you're looking at it, to kind of describe it to our listeners, it at first glance almost looks like it looks almost like an FMJ that you then almost pottery spun to a tip.
Yeah, it's kind of nipply.
Yeah, it's kind of, I wasn't going to say nipply, but Weston said
Yeah.
it, so now I'm going to say it's kind of nipply. And to me, I come from a hunting background and spent a decent amount of time in country of grizzlies. So you kind of look about and you kind of, I've carried buffalo boar, I've carried that hard cast stuff like that you're referencing. And at the end of the day, when you start to read into some, and people can forum stuff to death, but there's also truth behind a lot of things out there. When you look at grizzlies, I've seen examples in museums or like real life scenarios where you have that thick skull, you have the meat, and you have some of those bullets, and they actually deflect off in the skull and just travel up through the bone and the meat and never actually penetrate the skull and just like stay there. There was a museum or something that had, I can't remember where it was, that had that of a grizzly skull, and it's unbelievable. And so what a lot of people don't necessarily know about a grizzly bear is that incredibly thick skull, and that's kind of what that 10 millimeter, the 45, 40 kind of geared towards when you're carrying into Kenai. You're thinking bear defense, you're obviously thinking other animals, but you want that penetrating power. Everything else, you want that stopping power, they call it. You want the fluid displacement. You want it to stop in there, create a huge wound cavity. If you're talking bear defense, you do want that. You want a wound, but you want the penetrating power because the thing you're going to need to do. It's not like a rifle. No pistol's like a rifle. You're not going to get that hydrostatic shot that shuts something off unless you hit the central nervous system. That's what it is. What you're looking to do is to make something hurt so bad that it wants to go away, or to essentially try and hit it somewhere that's going to do that. So it's accuracy. You got to hit, but you have to penetrate to do that. You hit a charging grizzly anywhere in the body, and it's probably not going to care about it unless it's somewhere that hits it off. But you're not going to get that shock wave that, like if you shoot something with a rifle, you just see, a deer or an elk, they just drop. And that's something shut that central nervous system out. You don't have enough energy and pistol ammunition to do that.
Correct, yeah. And, in a certain way, we are outgunned if we're carrying a handgun for bears.
Exactly.
A grizzly bear is an amazing mountain of killing mass and claws, and so thoughtful design. We want deep penetration because we're not going to be able to choose where we shoot it. It's going to give us the shot that it gives us when it's charging us. And then good wounding, improved wounding, is a plus of this design. But there are other benefits too. Versus a hard cast, you're carrying about 30 to 40% less weight in your magazines.
Consideration as a backcountry hunter.
Yep, absolutely. We cut a toothbrush in half and, carry, a lot of weight in ammo. So, and so that's something to consider as well. It's also, reduced felt recoil. That's
big for follow up.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people, aren't, big strong men who, hold on to a gun well. It's self-defense is for everybody, and being able to handle recoil is a big deal.
We're actually going to be able to use your guys' stuff in an upcoming video we're hoping to shoot here. I won't go too much into it because we haven't shot it yet, but we're in the works of it, and I'm interested. We're hopefully going to take out some of the G9 Woodsman versus some other stuff. It's essentially a charging grizzly scenario.
Oh, sweet.
And trying super magnums versus semi-autos and seeing how effective you can actually be on target.
I think that's a great idea.
Hoping to run some of those and see if that reduced felt recoil does a big difference in effective rounds on target.
Yeah.
My favorite round from you guys, like just as far as visually speaking, is these hydraulically fracturing ones.
Yeah, so that's a Safari round there. That's in 375 H&H, and it's a version of our long range hunter. Our long range hunter, this is it in a 6.5. Basically, it's a hollow point that's been has a brass tip inserted into it, and so these tips have a really thoughtful design that in a certain way functions like our EHP in terms of its ability to push fluid outward. This particular bullet in brass without this tip won't even open up, which you'd think, okay, there's a bigger hollow point in the front, but by encouraging that rapid fluid displacement and basically a forcing cone in there, it hydraulically fractures that brass and creates this kind of low density but super sharp shrapnel with the back half of the bullet still trucking through to give you a good through and through wound. Blood trailing doesn't really usually last long, but there's a significant blood trail with those.
There really is like a monumental amount of science and physics that goes into all this stuff. It's just so cool. I
Ballistics is part science and part witchcraft.
Yeah, I remember you saying because when I initially looked at it, it just looks like a couple little holes, and I get what you're saying about allowing fluid to get in there, and but this is calibrated and machined to the twist rate of this round to this charge of
it's even actually
powder.
like a slightly degraded version of the twist rate because they're going to start losing rotational inertia.
Yeah, so even
somebody much better at math than
so
me figured it out.
Yeah.
So this is it's your super match, correct, Weston?
That's a long range hunter still.
The long range hunter, sorry.
Yeah, here's
so
the super match.
Describing their long range hunter, it's a hollow point, and it has what you would think of like a normal ballistics tip, like you would find on the plastic tip on any other hunting bullet, except for it's manufactured out of brass, so it's a nice hard tip that I imagine, as well as the forcing cone, probably presses back in and aids the hydraulic.
It's really not the depression of the tip itself. It's more the fluid forcing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's set in there tight. You'd need a pair of pliers to pull it out, unlike some plastic ballistic tips that I know.
Or
and
ones that melt.
Yeah, or ones that melt or disintegrate. And it's got these little CNC'd cuts in it, just little openings. So when you're looking at it from the top of the round, the projectile, it's just these little rivulets basically to force fluid into to aid in the expansion, if that's the plan, or hydraulically fracture depending on the brass or the copper. And then I'm assuming this probably also, having not a hollow point on there, not having the plastic one, this is probably very precise. I assume this is machined as well. You probably get pretty consistent BCs out of that, don't you?
Yeah. And so I guess one feature is that tip does normalize the BC between a match bullet and the long range hunter as well. So you can shoot with the match stuff, which is less expensive for us to produce, less expensive for people to buy, and then take out, and you're gonna have same point of impact even at extended range. Yeah. So
really,
I don't think we have any two of the same bullets here.
No, but for comparison's sake, it's a match grade bullet. It's just a turned copper bullet.
6.5 bullets at least. Yeah. And so they're remarkably. This is a different model of the bullet, really, but those two shapes, with
are
their
close
pairs,
enough that you're not even seeing a point of impact shift.
Correct, even at distance.
Wow.
So you can train with the cheap stuff, go shoot matches with the cheap stuff, or cheaper stuff. It's not really cheap, less expensive stuff, and then you're dialed in. You've been training all year with this same load and same gun in theory, and you can take it out there and hunt with.
That's huge.
Absolutely. And then we also do see much higher consistency in BC just because of the consistency of that method of manufacture.
I know the next test I want to run.
Yeah. No, it'd be a fun one to do. A lot of these things, we were testing all of this stuff at a time when we weren't like recording it for marketing purposes or anything like that. I think our company's really been focused on building a factory, building the IP that
the infrastructure
that we've forgotten to market along the way, and so we're trying to change that.
Yeah.
And so
here you are.
I know exactly. Yeah, and so things like that need to get documented.
Yeah, I
and
mean, as a reloader, as a ballistics guy, like I said, I heard what you were saying with the EHP, and then seeing is believing.
Mm-hmm.
This to me is like definitely more the world that I've come from. You tell me that 2 different bullets are going to shoot the same,
and those 2 aren't, to be clear. But
two of these where you have the projectile, you have your brass ballistics tip, and then just a standard match bullet.
Mm-hmm.
And you're telling me they're going to shoot together at distance and no point of impact shift? I'm like, game on. Let me see.
Yeah, and so that's kind of some of the other patents, or other parts of the patent. It's really one main patent that has a whole bunch of parts in it that we're bringing to market slowly. We have over 50 patented shapes, and we're only really running on the market right now, probably 4 of them. Wow. So there's a lot more coming, and some exciting stuff that. Will really push the envelope, I think.
From what it seems, is the foundation you guys have built is unbelievable. The thought that you guys have put into every one of your bullets it just keeps going. Like, it's so much more than I could have ever imagined that goes into ballistics. I mean, you even bring in biology. That little segment that I had to do of the thrombin.
Oh, yeah.
I had so much fun doing that because I had to pull up research papers from all these students about how the body reacts to certain types of trauma and how that affects bleeding and what is devastating for something that's alive and what is something that's manageable. How does the platelets work? How does blood stop?
Yeah.
And you guys are taking that into account when you're designing this hydraulically fracturing physics masterpiece.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Thrombin's a funny one to touch on. I guess maybe as a footnote for people who are listening, thrombin is I can't even think of what it is. It's a hormone.
What's the word I'm looking for here?
Blood protein.
Not a blood protein. It's probably
it's a body stuff that gets.
I don't know. You have platelets. You have white blood cells. It's it's not that. It's a building block. It's amino acid or something.
It's a body stuff that gets
video.
emitted when you're cut, and it helps encourage clotting, and it basically I think it calls for platelets that cause the clotting.
It's called a chemical.
Right.
It's
a body thing.
It's a molecule.
Biology.
And so if you're cut with something blunt, like say we throw a lawn dart up and it hits Mac in the arm, it's a blunt cutting force, and so that's going to cause a lot of thrombin to be released, and it's going to activate or call for those platelets, and you're going to stop bleeding more quickly than say taking a broadhead to the arm, and so broadhead is going to have that very sharp, subtle cut, and it's not going to say, hey, wake up body and send platelets here.
It's why when you cut yourself shaving, it literally keeps bleeding for an eternity.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
You're like, is this ever going to stop?
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you can get a lot better effect on a game animal with a sharp cutting action, and that's why these hydraulically fracturing bullets. I mean, it's amazing how much blood is found in the vital cavity when somebody's shot with these.
I might expect to hear from my surgeon, but not from my bullet scientist.
Right. Yeah.
So to Ryan's point, when you start pulling out stuff like that, it's like, holy crap, these guys, they thought it through.
Yeah. It just keeps going deeper. I mean, I'm sure you can even go in on this woodsman on these rounds. This is more clever than it looks like because you could have just made a 45-degree angle off the edge of this flat round to the point, but you didn't. You made it a curve because I think it has something to do with the physics of the air, like Bernoulli's principle, where you're creating that lower pressure which causes it to slip through and have the tendency to want to keep going.
So you're close there, and it's not air, it's fluid. So a lot of the curves that you see on our bullets, what we call shape charge technology, anything that's staying the same shape to create the wounding. The shape is what creates the wounding.
Which is a dope name. Well done on that.
Yeah, that was Joshua. But the depth charge, anything that goes in and then blows up. But you see curves on everything, and we talk about Bernoulli principle or the Venturi effect, where those shapes are creating a jet of pressure, and that's creating a pressure differential that is causing more material or fluid to be moved with it.
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah, but yeah, it's all focused on fluid. And we probably talk about fluid a lot when we were talking about mechanics.
I mean, you see the shape in like all over the place. I mean, you see it in your carburetors. You see it on planes. It's never been introduced to something that
fires out of a
gun. Like it's been used time and time again throughout the past century, but nobody's applied it to ballistics.
It's a lot of science talk for me. I'm kind of lost. I do know Venturi, but that's about
Venturi effect is the same thing as Bernoulli's principle. Same thing.
Well, that's the only one I know.
Yeah.
That comes from ballistics.
Yeah.
So you guys are testing this ammo like crazy, Weston. You guys have so many patents, like basically in holding, it sounds like, which you guys have already, some of the stuff on this table is newer. Some of it you guys have been doing for a while. It's kind of cool, I believe. Are we cool? This Safari stuff's cool?
Absolutely. Depending on when this is released, I think Safari stuff should be available on the website.
Very nice.
And maybe in some dealers near you soon.
So you guys you're slowly trickling stuff out. Obviously, it's clear that you guys put the proof in the pudding. Like, you test this stuff meticulously, so anything new that's coming out from you guys, like, okay, this has been put to the test. So segueing into that, I mean, we saw it in the factory. You guys have an unbelievable process for checks and balances. Super impressed to see all the machines going into that. And then there's still a human aspect. You guys still have hand inspecting, so like there's still so many checks and balances. And then we get to the actual shooting, which was what made me a true believer in the EHP, which obviously we've talked a lot about, but that's kind of I would say it's like your flagship probably.
Yeah.
We had the chance to go out and film this video with the G9 guys, and Coney from Genesis. Shout out to Genesis for coming out, letting us borrow their slow-mo camera for some of this. Great guys over there making cool John Wick gear as well.
You got to get him on the podcast.
He's traveling. Cody is the man who you've probably seen him if you're a fan of any gun tuber, because he makes the rounds and goes to all the shows. But we definitely would love to have him on. So
yeah, I want to talk about that shotgun.
So we got to go out and test these in a controlled environment. We went to sharpshooting. They were kind enough, sharpshooting indoor range and gun shop, and they were kind enough to let us use their indoor range to test this. And the test, essentially, we're going to kind of walk through that for essentially the podcast portion of the video. So we had sort of a limited amount of time, like Ryan said, so we were limited in our options, so we couldn't go through it all. We'd love to dive deeper into it, but we took a super common self-defense round out on the market. We took the Hornady FTX, and this is a 115 grain hollow point projectile with a little plastic nub in the tip. So we took this round and we compared this in 9mm to the G9 EHP, and we opted to shoot through drywall. We started off with a control, then we fired through two sheets of drywall. We fired through a steel, like old school car door, and then we also went through a windshield, testing a variety of things. For each of the first three, we shot into ballistics gel, and then we ended on the windshield, shooting into a target actually to see deflection and a couple other things. And so to start off, we kind of touched on it already, but ballistics gel, not a 1-to-1 medium. You guys have a standardized test you do for it. We fired both the EHP and the Hornady FTX into it, and both did exactly what you'd expect them to do. Great wound channels, stopped where they needed to stop, performed the EHP did as advertised, the Hornady FTX created a nice big wound channel. We got a perfect mushroom out of it. Exactly what you would want to see.
It did what it's designed to do there. Yeah.
Out of any self-defense ammunition. Like that's what, as far as the old school way of designing goes. The EHP, which this was the one, for those not watching, take a look at this design online. This bullet looks like it could be reloaded. And Weston actually said,
yeah, we have reloaded them multiple times in the
disclaimer,
past.
do not do that at home.
Yeah, it's not a good way to save money. You can reload them until the rifling rips, pulls off enough copper, so it's not sealing well anymore and you start losing pressures. But yeah, it's unaffected, right? It looks the way it was.
Yeah, it was shot through nothing into the gel. And that goes back to the point you were talking about of it's not designed to change shape. It's meant to do the same thing without changing shape. And boom, immediately off the bat, we're testing that. We see that. It's like, but at the same time, see that devastating wound channel and stopping where it's supposed to. It's like, okay, that was pretty cool. But
okay, so now we see it works just as good with no barrier.
Yeah.
Right. And
to that note, this round, it did exactly what it was supposed to do on bare gel, but we don't shoot naked people very often. I think I did just see an article in the news or headline that there was an apartment dweller who shot a naked man who had run through his wall. Actually, it was kind of funny.
So it does happen.
But it does happen, yeah. And so not to say that it doesn't.
Wait. He shot a naked man who ran through his wall.
Came in like Kool-Aid Man style.
What?
Yeah, and so he shot his naked Kool-Aid man.
Oh, wow.
But yeah,
I cannot imagine a more terrifying way to wake up. If somebody charges into my house naked, I immediately assume he's more dangerous than if he's clothed.
The time of day that happened is very important to that story.
Yeah.
That was like at 6 in the morning. Yeah. That would be very surprising.
Such a good headline. I had to click on it. I was like, apartment dweller.
Was this Florida?
Man.
Was this Florida man?
No, it wasn't even. I want to say it was Georgia. It was.
Okay,
it was
so he was from Florida.
Yeah.
He was on vacation in Georgia.
Florida, Florida downstream.
But yeah, no. So this is going to be not what we see after it goes through clothing or like say winter layering and stuff like that.
It's going to be what you see sometimes.
Yeah.
And
diminished capacity of that.
Yeah, and so we want something that works consistent. Like just what makes a good defense round. It's something that performs well on target, doesn't overpenetrate, and does what it's supposed to do as consistently as possible. And most hollow points are going to be in the failure to do what they're supposed to do, whether it's underpenetrate, overpenetrate, jacket separate, tumble.
Right.
They're going to fail about 30% of the time to do what they're meant to do. You introduce barriers, and as we saw, shooting on the range at sharpshooting, I don't think it ever really did what it was supposed to do.
Well, that's where it really. Because anything, any control, any scientific experiment, and, I'm no bullet scientist, but any control you do, you would hope that what you're doing performs flawlessly, if that's the goal of the product. So, in that sense, it did. But you're talking about self-defense. You're talking about the hunting less so because we're not shooting through barriers unless, like you were saying, you're talking about bone and stuff like that. But in self-defense, police, military, law enforcement, any of those sort of situations, it's not a controlled environment at all. It's the real world. And the real world is the least controlled environment in the history of environments.
Right.
And so planning around it's why people choose the things. It's why you choose to carry with a light. If that's your prerogative. It's why you potentially carry an extra magazine or have a primary in the car. Because it's why you choose to carry in the first place. You're not looking for a perfect controlled scenario. The whole point of training and the things we do is like, I have no idea what's going to happen if, God forbid, that moment ever comes. And the last thing I want to think about is, are the tools I have going to fail me? Like, hopefully I can prepare myself only so well. But I can be pretty darn sure that the tools I'm using for any job are going to be tried, tested.
I mean, I feel like it's a well-known thing about like traditional ammo, like shooting through a windshield. Like everybody hears about the snipers in the military. They're trained to aim slightly above their target or whatever, so that way it deflects down. And I mean, everyone knows that even if you're not from a ballistic background, and it's what you're trying to do, the whole purpose of this ammo is not to be a bigger wound or like, even that it is, or behave like better in its target, but to get to its target in the exact same way every time.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously a whole lot of dogma and a whole lot of conventional wisdom about training, carrying, carrying medical, all of those things, and there's been a lot of effort put forth into what you need to be ready for anything, or to have reduce your failure rate, right?
Yep.
And
have the best averages you can.
Exactly. Yeah, and but not a lot of people are looking at ammo always, and it's a paradigm shift that people just say, well, it's a granted, yeah, I'm gonna I'll just have more rounds because a hollow point is gonna fail this many times, or
right.
you know what I mean? And it's not really a decision people are making, but there needs to be a paradigm shift where there is better ammo, buy it,
Right.
and
Take the guesswork out of it.
exactly.
Yeah, I don't want to
surprises.
go to a range and train with thousands of rounds like through different barriers to be like, okay, well, if I am
This one had a
corner-
25% failure rate, and
right,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's just inconsistent. You can't trust it, and
Yeah, no, you don't want the most important day of your life to be, decided by, the barriers that were in the way.
Right.
But so yeah, we, digging back into we shot through drywall. We saw actually I thought it was a better wound from the Hornady when it went through the drywall than it was the initial one, even though it didn't give you that beautiful hollow point. It's technically, it's a failure to do what it's supposed to do. But it penetrated to like, I think 16 inches and actually left a pretty good effect on target.
It would be ineffective. We have it here, and it's pretty mangled. The plastic tip definitely didn't prevent any drywall from getting in there and keeping the perfect mushroom. Like, if we can provide a picture or something like this, we will. But the side by side is obvious. Like, there's a difference there. Like you said, though, still. It did still perform, but that doesn't exactly inspire confidence that it's like, that doesn't look repeatable.
Yeah, and it penetrated like 8 inches more than it normally does. It didn't do what it was meant to do out there. And a lot of times what we'll see is, the drywall will fill that hollow point full, whether or not there is a plastic tip in there, but it'll just turn into an FMJ, and just, that pressure on the outside holding that hollow point together is greater than the
expansion power,
and so it's just going to remain an FMJ functionally.
Wow. And then once again, we had another EHP that there's a little bit of drywall in the flutes. That won't harm nothing. Put a little denatured alcohol in there. Probably
run under the sink.
Probably could reload this one.
Yeah.
Once again.
Yeah. And I mean, you look at the hydrostatic shock in that test too.
Yeah,
I was watching it frame by frame over and over.
The stretch on it, it was huge.
It was, noticeably larger than the Hornady. The Hornady did well for penetration.
Well, part of that is the energy. Part of the energy was dumped into the drywall, and not a lot of the energy dump happened at all in the drywall for the G9.
Yeah. You see a lot cleaner, pass through and the holes. Even it's funny if you actually go look at a drywall or paper target when you shoot an EHP, it looks like our logo that's left behind on the target.
Oh, that's too funny.
You keep like coming up with these crazy. Actually, I can kind of see that. I've seen the spirals when you shoot close up on.
Yeah.
That's got to be by design.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, that wasn't just a happy accident.
It came to be. But yeah, no. So it looks like kind of the outline or the trace of that flute shape.
Too cool.
I'm never gonna look at that logo the same again. I kind of wondered about it. It's like, it's a cool logo, but no, I've literally seen this swirl before. So.
Wow.
And then that was once again that's probably, you talk about. Okay, police scenarios, somebody barricaded in the house, something like that. But then for all of us who live at home, like, drywall is probably one of the most real scenarios. Like, I'm not exactly planning on getting in a shootout anytime soon, but I'm mostly not planning on getting in a shootout where I'm shooting somebody's car door or something. But, like, I have, a firearm in my house for home defense, and there's a lot of drywall in my house.
Right.
And that's I think drywall for some reason becomes a bit of a buzzword about penetration and stuff like that. People are like, well, how many apartment buildings is that thing going to rip through?
Yeah.
But when we're accountable for our shots and having the capability to shoot a threat that's behind your kitchen counter or whatever, is that's a realistic scenario where you don't want the bullet to overpenetrate and you want it to do its job on the other side.
Well, and that's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. It's like, okay, so the situation is either I'm not responsible with my shots and I overpenetrate and it leaves my domicile, or the threat isn't harmed at all because it dumps off in the drywall and lands not on my target. So there's
it's a moot point because it's a
but that's obviously a huge common barrier that's tested for good reasons because a lot of houses out there, it's a lot of drywall.
Plus, I mean, you could change your strategy on how you would imagine like a home defense scenario.
Cover is not concealment, or
Yeah.
concealment is not cover.
Right. Be like, well, this guy, he has no idea that this round is going to go right through that fridge. It's going to get you.
As long as there's no ham in the way.
Yeah, right.
You ruined the Thanksgiving turkey. Okay, we just wrote your next ad for you. It's like, or you kind of did. It's like the G9 hollow point. Get them if they're hiding behind the fridge. Unless your Christmas ham's in there, it'll stop.
It is.
Put a GoPro inside a fridge.
I mean, that's like a huge reason. I mean, to have the ability to say that wall is irrelevant.
Yeah.
On my aim.
In more open environments, it becomes more prevalent, right? Cars are involved in a giant percentage of law enforcement shootings, and unfortunately, a lot of those traditional rounds that are being fired by law enforcement are getting stuck in car doors. Where we can shoot through a car door, shoot through an A pillar, B pillar. Without deflection and still have terminal performance on the other end. And so it's a complete, tactical advantage that these law enforcement officers have when they carry this round, and that just isn't there otherwise. You can't out tactic being able to shoot through something.
And I mean, hollow points, like, I've seen them go through car doors. I've seen them go
and they do.
through. They do.
Yeah.
But it's extremely inconsistent. They might take a right. They might take a left. They might dump all their energy. Like say if the window's rolled down, it'll dump all the energy into the glass and then, tumble through and land on the seat. Or, I mean, they do go through, but it's not a perfect line like you guys have where you have that hole that is your logo.
And that's what we saw in the car door,
Which was my favorite test, by the way. That was so cool to see. And this was an old school car door.
Yeah,
this is American steel.
Like a heavy door.
This is not an aluminum whatever.
Right.
This is a legit car door. And sorry, I didn't mean to go through on
absolutely.
that.
And what we saw was, I think it was a jacket separation on the hollow point. And where our round wasn't totally unaffected either, but it's tracked true, and it still did its job. It penetrated a little bit more deeply, caused a little bit less wounding, just because the flutes were slightly diminished. But what you're seeing in terms of percentage difference in effect is night and day.
I mean, this one, you're talking about the penetration. This one looked so, I mean, you should have put a womp sound in the video. Like, it goes into the ballistics gel, the jacket and the core completely separate. The core ends up a little bit further past the jacket, and it had like 8 inches of penetration in gel, which the test BB, which you guys used to test, like, for lack of a better term, like, skin tension, like skin toughness.
It's really not a comparison to skin. It's just a good tool to think about how it compares to skin. We're shooting a BB to see how deep it's going to penetrate in the gel, and that's how we calibrate all the gel blocks. Yeah. So basically, you reject a gel block if the BB overpenetrates, but that's a BB going, I think it's like 390 feet per second, 890 feet per second.
And that BB made it 4 inches into that gel. This thing made it like 8.
Yeah. So we're not talking about an effective stopping capability. At that point.
You had clothing, you had a couple other barriers at that point. It's like that might leave a bruise. Like that's obviously hyperbole, but
not to mention
it completely fell apart.
Yeah, falling apart, coming in,
And then that to me was the most impressive test. Like you said, it did go a little further, Weston, and it did diminish the profile. You wouldn't want to reload this one, but you wouldn't want to reload any of them. Disclaimer. To me, just seeing is believing, and to have a control in this, and I misspoke earlier. You were saying it actually went further, but I was thinking it went shorter. To have a control through just ballistics gel, same distance, and then to shoot through a car door into ballistics gel. I apologize if you hear Mr. Presley Boy in the background. That's our office dog. He's a little antsy. To have this projectile have like 1.5 inch difference maybe in penetration. Through a car door from the control is insane.
Yeah, and I'm always going to nitpick exactly how we perform, and if it's a little bit reduced, then it is, and there's no problem with that. But yeah, it's having that consistency of function is fundamental.
Tactical. this bullet went where I aimed.
Mm-hmm.
This one had a chance of doing that, and it didn't.
Yeah, and I think it also just generally describes the principle and how these mechanics work, right? So if you're shaving down the features on that projectile, you're going to shave down the function that those features provide.
Well, it looks more like an FMJ at this point.
Yeah.
So it performed no, that's a lie. It did not perform like an FMJ, but you're making the features more similar.
It penetrated a little bit more.
It did, but not like a true.
Yeah, no, and if there was a way to measure, the depth of those flutes, the total volume of those flutes now, or the frontal area of those flutes, I think it would correlate very strongly to the, reduction in wound volume and the increase in penetration.
You don't have a fancy laser for that?
We don't, no.
Guess you don't have all the newest equipment.
A couple more gadgets. Adam's been pushing for one.
Oh, my God.
I tease.
Always need more measurement equipment.
So the next test we did was the glass.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, I want to apologize for that. Like we had our notice.
Yeah.
We were like, okay, you guys need to get out of here, basically. And we were like, okay, just went up and set up.
Doing it as fast as we can.
doing it as fast as we can. Then we put up the table, like, okay, yep, looks good, And
I think I communicated with Henry poorly on that because we got really focused on, okay, we got to make sure that the glass is, the section we're shooting is on the slow-mo. And then I think we kind of lost sight of the target.
Yeah, he just needed to crouch like another foot or two.
I think he wasn't aiming at the same point.
To put it in a nutshell, Henry was aiming, like we said, we were a little rushed. The test still showed what we needed to show, but on paper, Henry is aiming at a target that we put 2 dots on for him to aim at, and he was aiming so that we would be in frame for the slow motion camera.
Yeah,
so
I think he was aiming at the glass, not really.
He was aiming at the glass at the target, so he hits way below the. So disclaimer on that, he hits below it, but it still shows it. They pass through. You see the deflection, the car door, like Ryan was saying, this is a known thing. Like everybody knows. It's like shooting into water, like with a bow. It's refraction, but in real life. Like it's not a visual thing.
It's a path of least resistance. It's going to go straight through the glass.
Yeah. So we shot these once again, and it was 4 shots total. He did them in rapid succession. We had 2 shots on the left for the G9, 2 nice round holes in the paper target, and we had 2 shots on the right for Hornady, and we had 3 nice sideways holes on the target.
And I think if he was lower and he was that increased that angle that bullet was attacking that windshield, I think we would have seen a larger difference between you guys' ammo.
As you're more, I guess, more in line with the windshield angle is more closer to parallel with your shooting angle.
Right.
You're going to get more skipping, or just a darker when it does catch, or steeper when it does catch direction through. But yeah, I think if we'd had more time, we would have kind of
we would have been like,
aimed
we'll
at this point.
But I still think it
over,
makes. I still think it definitely gets the point across. Like once again, consistency. We had 2 nice, and anybody who shoots, you can go up and you can look at a target and you can see what a bullet is doing at that point. Mm-hmm. We had nice concentric holes from both the G9 stuff, which I wouldn't expect from a lot of bullets going through a barrier, much less glass, which is just notoriously fickle. Mm-hmm. And then we had a jacket separation or something of some degree, because we had 3 holes on the Hornady side of the target. So one of those bullets separated from its jacket or something along those lines. And then you could just look at them, and they had that more oblong shape that tells me that bullet's tumbling. Mm-hmm. So as far as distance accuracy, because another thing, we think about shooting, into cars for law enforcement, military scenarios. Another thing to consider is an officer, this happens all the time, is he has to fire out of his vehicle. Mm-hmm. So if he has to fire out of his vehicle and, obviously the distance between driver and windshield not far, but if he has to shoot out of his vehicle at a target, who's 20, 30 yards away, something like that, or even further, now that's, it's exponential. When a ship is off, by 1 degree over a course of miles, he's hundreds of miles off course.
Yeah,
yep.
Gotcha.
And that's because it becomes so much more drastic a distance. There, you can correct for, say you're shooting into the front seat of a car, you can generally correct for that distance, right? Aim high, it's going to deflect low. But there's no possible way to correct for, a
tumbling bullet in the sky.
Exactly. Yeah. At those distances, the person's going to have to be 30 feet tall to be able to, to be able to produce a, impact on target, because that deflection rate, just
It's
staying the same,
random.
but
You don't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
Like you
yeah.
might, but you might not. Consistency.
Yeah.
Best averages. Like
I think if we're doing another video with a windshield anytime soon, I'd like to try this test again with the G9 stuff.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah, and
Because-
absolutely. And after people watch this video, I think there's things they can find on our YouTube channel that show some car shooting too, in and out, and show some deflection
Yeah,
stuff.
you got
So
some
there's
pretty
more
impressive stuff on there. Yeah, I've taken a look.
Oh,
And I
nice.
was like, because when I was looking at the R footage, I'm like, man, this really isn't looking. It was just because the angle that he had was like almost perpendicular to what
Yeah.
he was shooting. So I mean, we did have those perfect concentric holes with yours.
Mhm.
Just it does show consistency. It is not tumbling, but it'd be cool to see the consistency through a drastic angle.
Yeah.
To your bullet too.
Yeah. No, it was super cool. Like I said, Weston, I am a true believer now. I mean, not that I didn't believe you. We did the tour. I saw all this is made. I'm in that world, and I was like, these guys are making good ammo. Like, I can tell. And all the things that go into, so it's like I know I can trust it from a manufacturing standpoint of, okay, they have the best averages. Like, they're doing things that mean, pretty much the only way I can get it better, and then even I probably couldn't because I'm not that good at it, would be to hand load my own 9mm. And I'm not going to do that because, one, that's a lot of time. I got a kid at home. But two,
Yeah, and I can tell you, coming from a reloading standpoint, it's amazing how precise those mass production machines are. It was something I had to see to believe at a certain point. I grew up shooting rifle matches, things like that, and hand loading a lot on really precise equipment, very, very slowly. And we're cranking out standard deviations that are better.
I mean, purely for the sake of devil's advocate, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's about the only way. That's the only way, from just seeing how you guys are manufacturing ammo, that's the only way you even have a fighting chance to make something more precise, more consistent. But you can't get that bullet either, so you're going to have to... Just seeing that, so I'm like, boom, okay, I trust how these guys are making it. They're doing it the right way. And then we talked about it. We tested it, and now I've seen it, and it's like, I don't know why I would ever carry anything else. Like, I'm converted. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm converted. So it is a spectacular round by a spectacular company that's doing really cool things, and it sounds like to me we have even more exciting things to expect in the future from G9.
Absolutely. Yeah, the hunting stuff, the safari, that gets me really fired up. It's I think it was about 2 years ago when we decided, okay, we're gonna make a push on the safari line, and Joshua and I went down to Africa and had to test everything.
Wow.
And, it was tough. Yeah.
Rough.
And, we test everything, and just the initial getting there, talking to PHs, oh, you brought your own ammo that you designed, and then the seeing them like, well, this is something completely.
I wish we had those. We have you're holding the brass round, but I wish you had the ones that. I guess you don't even need them because Weston actually showed me a couple of these rounds that were fired into a Cape Buffalo. If you know anything about Cape Buffalo,
they're tough customers.
Yeah, and then once again, looks like you can reload them, which is insane.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. We did some testing on a Cape Buffalo where we shot it with one of these solids, and we put it in the hip, and it was dead, and we just wanted to kind of check things out, and you could stick your finger into the hole and have a hard time touching the sides on the entrance wound. And it's just next level stuff. I'd never, things you don't expect. Obviously big calibers, powerful rounds, but things that just are so different from what's conventional, especially on the solid side. A solid is generally just a very rounded off nose, solid piece of brass that weighs 400 grains.
So when you tested this, you had to go and tell a guide that you had your own footage that you made. And he's obviously never seen it, right?
All of our own ammo. We were there, and hunting dangerous game, and I wasn't hunting buffalo there. Joshua was, and to say, okay, the peach is standing behind you. If you're taking a shot, like everybody's on the line here. Buffalo are famous for
Yeah,
dangerous
it's
animals.
one of the most dangerous animals you could be hunting.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
what was the reaction from the guide? Like when he saw the hole?
Oh, yeah, I think I've got actually on video. He's saying something in Afrikaans that I'm sure is not podcast friendly.
Wow.
Sounds like a PH.
Yeah.
Surreal.
Yeah. So
But just out of curiosity, I'm going to wrap us up here.
Yeah.
But I would have loved to have shown that, and hopefully maybe we'll get a picture. But
yeah.
Just for my curiosity, when you fired that test round, Buffalo was already dead. You guys just wanted to see the performance of this because you fired one of.
It was a style more like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That we shot him with.
How far and where did you recover the bullet? Was it still in the animal, or is it on the outside hide?
That one that you had, that one was found on the far side hide. But the solid was found. We kind of shot him at an angle. It clipped the hip ball, and then we found it up against the kind of armpit area on the far side. So it's a
Traveled the length of the length of the body.
Yeah.
And still looked like that. That's insane. Because I was wondering. I mean, I saw the shape it was in, and I see how it starts out. I was like, not expanding. I mean, you have the fluid expansion. Any other round, I would expect it like a close distance to just zip through it.
Mm-hmm.
But the fluid displacement you're talking about is.
Yeah. Yep, and it's designed similar. It's designed with a similar intention to the Woodsman. It's just we want to create a little more wounding, and we've got so much more weight to work with. I mean, and
it's so much more powder and speed.
Yeah.
So
with the 416 Rigby, it's a 400 grain round moving 2,400 feet per second.
Wow.
So there's a whole lot.
It's a lot more behind that than
massive,
Yeah.
absurd.
So
Yeah.
But yeah, the safari stuff's gonna be really exciting. I think that's it's a very tradition soaked aspect of hunting and ammunition and rifle making, and so we did our best to kind of honor that in the way of their traditional grain weights, traditional loadings. So a user with a 416 Rigby that has been tuned for that type of ammo is the iron sights are gonna be filed for it already.
Yep.
There's you can switch from a conventional round to something like this and really reap the benefits on performance.
That's so cool. Well, Weston, I appreciate the time. Appreciate you and Joshua letting us come around, see the facility, see all the cool stuff, and to show everybody out there, our viewers, as well as your guys, like the cool stuff that's going on at G9. This is a couple North Idaho companies who are doing exciting stuff in the outdoor industry and the shooting industry. It was awesome to get that opportunity to get to know you guys as well, and looking forward to continuing to do stuff with you guys in the future. I see a lot of cool stuff, hopefully, between the two brands. And if you're in the North Idaho area and you want some of the best ammo around, and then you want to put it in the best holsters around, stop by the shops, get some. We sell it right here in the pro shop, and be on the lookout. We're out there in stores. Obviously, we both sell online. If you want to rock some real legit bear defense in your Kenai, or you're running a Solace or a Ronin and you want a round that you can trust every single time to do the same thing, check out the G9 external hollow point, G9 Woodsman, everything else they got going on. These guys really are doing the real thing. So
sweet. Thanks for having us. It's been a real pleasure, and we appreciate all of it.
That was tons of fun.
For sure, man.
Do something similar soon.
Yeah. All right.
Signing off.